Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Break-Thru Active Podcast. This is episode 30. It's a big one, 30 episodes in 2020. As always, I'm here with Mitchell. How are you, mate?
Yeah, doing well, thanks, mate. 30 episodes already.
We
I think we did our first one back in probably the first week that we were closed down in March or April, and probably done a few episodes, 2 episodes in a few weeks, but we've committed to one a week at least, so we're doing all right.
Yeah, I think we did like 3 a week at one point when we had nothing to do during COVID.
Yeah, we had a bit of time on our hands.
Okay, so today's podcast is a very important one. It's dear to my heart because I've trained through injuries the last 5 years. And the topic of today's podcast is training with injuries. Should you not? Is strength training beneficial to injuries? When should you rest, and when should you go see a specialist, whether that's a physio, chiro, osteo, whatever you like?
Yeah, it's something that I know you have definitely dealt with a lot in the last going on 5 years now, and it does come up obviously with our members from time to time, and there are a handful of members currently who have a few aches and pains, and it's a conversation that we're having pretty much daily with people, whether it be about altering exercises in the gym, or getting text messages from people, or just chatting to people before and after sessions or during sessions about what they should be doing. Should they be resting? Should they be training? What should they be avoiding? So it's a good opportunity for us just to discuss it all in a little more detail.
Well, and there's two trains of thought. When a member gets injured, whether it might be a strained muscle or a strained tendon, quite often their friend that doesn't exercise will say, why do you exercise? Like, you just end up hurting yourself. But on the other end, if you don't exercise, what happens when you're older? Right? So I just want everyone to understand that if you train on a regular basis, you will get injured. Right? And there is a big difference between getting injured and just having aches and pains with training.
Yeah, absolutely. And I guess that's where it's our responsibility and our job as well to make sure we are managing these aches and pains and injuries, because there are right and wrong ways to go about it. Very rarely, and I think you can probably agree with this as well, should rest be the prescription.
Yeah,
there are a handful of things that when you are wanting or needing to be off your feet, but very, very rarely should you be prescribed complete rest. There might be taking it easier or avoiding certain movements or certain exercises if it is like a whole upper body thing, but very, very rarely should it be rest altogether.
like never ever. Like,
yeah,
even if someone is in a car accident and they're in hospital and they can't move a muscle in their body, a physio will literally go into that room and they will do this scraping technique, which draws blood into the muscle, which has a similar effect to exercise. Like your muscle.
Yeah, I was talking more from the gym standpoint,
yeah.
but yeah, like there's doing nothing is going to make it worse. And like you said, there are people employed in hospitals to stretch people, to move people, to do techniques like Jamie just mentioned, because they're fully aware that when your body is at complete rest and is so for a longer period of time, then it not only doesn't aid improvement and aid the betterment of whatever the issue is, but it prolongs it and makes it worse.
I love my extreme examples to drive the point home.
Do I ever?
But the point being is, regardless of the injury, as Mitch said, complete rest is never, ever the answer. And if you were told that by someone, sorry, we're not physios, we're not doctors, we're not surgeons, but we have 5 years experience. We have 10 years training experience working with a lot of people, and we've seen the majority of injuries. I can't remember a time where someone's approached me or you and they've surprised us. And the answer is always continue with your training, but you just have to make modifications. And that's where having a good coach and intelligent programming definitely comes into it.
Yeah, and I think, sometimes it is just a GP who would advise you to rest. And in their defense, they have no idea what we're doing at the gym and what we're doing with our training. And you know, maybe it is more times than not, if people are working out, they're doing the wrong things, and they're probably doing more harm than good. But we know that for what our skill set is, and from our experience, that we are able to handle people with injuries and with aches and pains. And anyone who has got any sort of ache or pain or injury within our program can attest to that, and know that we are able to work around anything. We can modify and scale exercises and workouts, and then obviously common sense prevails a lot of the time. If you've got a sore knee, we're not going to have you doing a lot of jumping or running up and down the street. So I think sometimes when people get told to rest, it's more, I guess, they're covering themselves as well. Because if a doctor was to tell someone to continue to train and continue to exercise, then it gets it worse, and then they can be responsible for that. But like we said before, and unless it is some sort of horrific car accident, or and I'm talking about exercising in the gym, some sort of very bad accident, or some sort of acute injury like that, then you shouldn't really be resting. There is always something that you can do to help aid that recovery process.
Yeah, and there's two trains of thought. The other train of thought is you can work around the injury. So, for example, if you have a shoulder injury, you can continue to train your legs and core. But let's discuss some more of the specific injuries that we hear about. So, injury number one is a major one. So, it's like a torn ligament. So, like an ACL ligament or meniscus typically happens when you have a fall, or it's a high impact injury. Great news. Strength is the answer. We want to strengthen the muscles around the knee. There's the VMO, the vasculitis, your glutes, your hamstrings, to prevent that ligament from being under more load. That's injury number one.
So just mention, like, what would be something that would cause an injury like that?
So I was playing AFL, and I went to sidestep. It was the first sidestep of my career. I tried to change direction, and I blew my knee out. So it was just a high impact injury. I took a very, very strong step off my right knee, and it just buckled. So the anterior cruciate ligament, the ligament at the front of my knee, snapped. Now, that is the type of injury that's never, ever going to happen to us in the gym. That is a high impact sports injury. But in that injury, I had surgery, but the next 12 months, the treatment for that injury was strength.
Exactly. And that's where that sort of injury, I guess what you're saying, is more of like a trauma thing. It's not something that where you get like a bit of an ache or a pain in your knee from doing, a lot of lunges or doing a run. You're not going to blow out your ACL doing that. So I think it's just important for people listening that's sort of the difference.
If you have a torn ligament, at the end of the day, the answer is strength. Especially if it's a partial tear that will heal. It's so important that you can strengthen the muscles around that injury to give it the chance to heal. Let's move on to next injuries. So tendonitis. This really bothers me, actually, because lots of doctors get this confused. So there is a huge difference between tendonitis and tendonitis. Okay, tendonitis would be, I move house all weekend. I'm under enormous load for 48 hours, and I get a sore elbow out of the blue. That is tendonitis. That is an injury that you should probably rest for a couple of days. But the majority of our members, the injuries they experience are actually tendinosis. And what that is, that's more of a degenerative condition. So tennis elbow or golfer's elbow or plantar fascia, that's when there's something not functioning in that joint correctly. And over a long period of time, the tendon in that elbow is under a lot of stress. And typically that is the aches and pains that you may feel during training or after training.
Yeah, and that's when you're looking at those two, so tennis elbow and golfer's elbow, like they are quite common. And I've played golf growing up, and I mean, obviously I didn't know as much about it when I was playing, but we would always have young people, older people that would complain about that sort of pain. And to Jamie's point, that's not something that just happens in one round of golf.
No.
or a couple of rounds of golf. That is years and years of golf, and that movement and that swing mechanics that you have. A lot of torsion gets placed on the inside part of your elbow, and that's something that happens over time. And like Jamie mentioned, not to be confused with some aches and pains you've got from doing a lot of lifting over a weekend, moving house, or doing something in the gym where you do have some ache and pain. So like Jamie mentioned, very commonly, I guess, misdiagnosed, and that's important because the treatment plan for that's very different.
Yeah, so with tendonitis, you might rest for 3 days and it's 100% better. Like literally, it's just a flare up. But then the tendinosis, which is what our members deal with and people that exercise a lot, there's usually something dysfunctioning at your shoulder, where there's just a lot more, I guess, stress and tension on the elbow joint than there should be, right? But just like when you have a ligament tear, the answer is strength. The answer for tendinosis is strength once again. So typically it's an issue in your shoulder and your shoulder doesn't externally rotate, your elbow's twisted, which is where that injury occurs. So whether it's ligaments or tendinosis, the answer is always strength. And I guess it's our job as coaches and our members' jobs to understand that it's dosing. It's dosing that injury. Like that elbow needs to experience some load to get better and get stronger, but not too much where it would flare up to something that would resemble something like a tendonitis.
Yeah, exactly. And with strength comes stability as well. And I think that's really important, where a lot of people think of strength as growing big muscles and lifting heavy weights. But a lot of the time, the strength that we're talking about is improving the strength and the muscle tone within those smaller muscles, which are around the area. So not saying that we need to work on our arms to get them bigger or our shoulders bigger. It's the smaller muscles. It's the muscles in our rotator cuffs and around our knee and a lot of those ones that control the movements a lot more, provide stability to those areas. And like Jamie just mentioned, that's our job as well. So that's where, anyone who has seen a physio and has been given exercises to do, they're no doubt boring, quote unquote. You got your bands and you're doing your pull aparts and you're doing, half a kilo raises and, scap retractions and things like that. But it's because it's those smaller muscles that aren't ever seen is what help provide stability to those areas. And we're able to help with that as well. So obviously first point of call is a physio, but we know enough to be able to give you things to be able to help with that as well.
Yeah, so like ligaments require more strength, tendonitis, few days rest, then strengthen the area, tendinosis, strengthen. But by far, the most common injury that I think that we see in the gym is just some type of bursitis or some type of inflammation of either your hip joint or your shoulder joint. So the main one that I see, and I've experienced myself, is shoulder bursitis or shoulder impingement. It's when a client would reach out in front or go out to the side of duct and they feel some type of clicking in their shoulder or almost like their shoulder is catching. And over a long period of time, there is a small sac of fluid in your shoulder joint that's rubbing against your clavicle, your collarbone, and it eventually becomes extremely inflamed, which is what that warm, burning sensation feels like after you train. And then that exact same principle happens in your hip.
Yeah, I won't name them, but I can think of a handful of people off the top of my head that are having a bit of an issue with that currently. And that's something, if you ask any physio, I'm sure that would be one of the more common, I guess, gym injuries or injuries for people who are active. So for someone, if they are experiencing that type of bursitis, talk a little bit about maybe what you've done in the past to help with your issue of that a few years ago, and then what will be best for someone if they are experiencing that.
That's why I love strength training so much, because whether it is a torn ligament, the rehab process is strengthen the muscles around it. Whether it's tendinosis, it is dose the appropriate amount of load, so strength training. And whether it's bursitis, there is usually a dysfunction somewhere else in the body which you lack strength in. So for example, with shoulders, 9 times out of 10, it is a tight chest, tight traps, your shoulders are elevated, which causes your bursa to become inflamed. So if you strengthen your external rotators and your lower trapezius, and you work on your thoracic extension, which we do on the foam roller, it's going to put your shoulder to sit in the right space. So every single injury that I've ever come across, it always responds well to strength if it is dosed correctly.
You touched on it briefly then, and I think that's one thing that a lot of people maybe find it hard to understand until they do see a professional. But if you've got a sore shoulder, like you mentioned, most of the time it's not the shoulder that is the problem. It is something else that is compensating for it. Unless you have had some sort of trauma in the shoulder, you've been tackled in football, or you've fallen on it, or had a car accident and banged your shoulder or something like that. But most of the time it does come from somewhere else, and that's where it is just really important to understand what is causing the issue and be able to follow the right movement plan and the right treatment plan to be able to fix it. Because you know you've been through it before, and if you've got a shoulder issue and you all of a sudden stop using your shoulder, you're going to end up with frozen shoulder, and that's
Super.
worse than the bursitis that you started with.
Well, I'll speak on my experience. I told my super spinator playing AFL. I went to a physio. She was young, just first out of university. I should have got a second opinion. She told me at the time just to go into complete rest. I remember we were working at Coco at the time, and I followed her advice and I rested it. And I rested for probably about 1 month or 2 months. The tendon healed, but I developed frozen shoulder. And because I did not move my shoulder for an extended period of time, I lost the ability to move my shoulder overhead correctly, which ended up leading to me getting bursitis and impingement, and then it retore the tendon, and I ended up getting an operation. Right? So I guess just with those type of injuries, it is amazing, I guess, how fast you can recover if you have good advice and you follow the protocol. Because if I knew what I knew now, or if I saw Felicity, who was our physio at Break-Thru Active, I'm confident that I would have avoided surgery.
So let's talk about, like you touched on a bit earlier, about the two schools of thought, and one of them is avoiding using that area. So if you've got a sore shoulder, it hurts to go above head, you don't go above head, you do a little bit more leg work, a little bit more core work, to kind of obviously avoid that sort of pain. And I think that for someone who was to come into us and has some, sore shoulder, sore knee, that's our school of thought that we follow. We will avoid that. But in addition to that, we will be encouraging them to see a physio, and in their own time, that's when they are responsible for recovering from that injury by doing the exercises that they get given.
Yeah.
It's when they're in here, we've got our workout. If it is a shoulder press and you can't go above head, we'll have them do a row instead. We still feel as though building the muscles around that area is going to be helpful, and obviously from a barbell row, it is going to aid that. But you need to take some responsibility yourself, and we can encourage you to do it, refer you on to people, and give you the name and number of people to call. But at the end of the day, you really need to be seeking out that help. And Jamie's been through just about every injury possible in the last 5 years, and one thing that you can absolutely take your hat off for him towards is that he's always sought help, and he's always done the recovery work and done the rehab work, and obviously there are still a few things here and there that are bothering him, but a lot of those injuries that you did have years ago aren't problems anymore.
No, and I've had 3 joint reconstructions. There's always going to be some, I guess, collateral damage when you get cut open by a surgeon. But why I'm so proactive, and why I encourage everyone to be so proactive, is you shouldn't live in pain. I hate this term. I've just learned to live with it. That's garbage. Like you're not supposed to be in pain. And if you've accepted that you're going to be in pain the rest of your life, then you haven't sought out the right help, or you haven't done the rehabilitation exercises that you were given from day one. Because if you got a sore shoulder or undiagnosed lower back pain, well, what's wrong with it? It's sore for a reason. And I think people need to understand that if it's sore, then your body is sending you a message that something is not working, and you can address it.
I think a lot of people just, will use the cop out of it's just old age as well. They get into their 40s or 50s, and they'll say, oh, it's just my knee, it's old age, or my back sore, it's just old age. And the only reason that holds some truth to it is because it's probably been hurting. The problem might have started when you were 30, and it's gotten slightly worse every year for 20 years. But just because you might be getting on in life and you're a little bit older, it doesn't mean you have to be, you settle with pain. And that's something that we are very passionate about, because we see both ends of the spectrum. We see people in their 40s and 50s and 60s who don't have any pain. They're able to run, they're able to do push-ups, they're able to deadlift their body weight. And it's incredible. It's fantastic. And then at the other end of the spectrum, luckily not so much in the people we have in our program, but you go down to the shops or you go somewhere and you'll see people hobbling around or struggling to get up out of a seat, and they're probably lucky to be 50 years old. And I think people, they become, like you mentioned, they become complacent, and they think that's just part of life, that you get older and you experience pain, and it's really not how life needs to be. And that's where, we are very, very much avid believers that age is really just a number, and it doesn't mean that your life needs to diminish as you get older. If anything, you can help correct some of those aches and pains that you might have had in your 40s, and by the time you're in your 50s, you're feeling better than you did 10 years ago.
Yeah, and what really bothers me is we're not financial advisors, but let's just say you've got a shoulder injury, you've got shoulder impingement, which I've had, and I know what it's like. And there were certain days where I couldn't reach over my head. So I'd wash my clothes and I'd hang them on, like, you would have saw it. I would hang them on the chairs in the kitchen because I literally couldn't go overhead because it hurt too much. If you're experiencing that level of pain, which is quite common, and then you tell me in the next sentence that you don't want to pay for the physio, it's $70 to get that one-off diagnosis to start your rehabilitation program, and you don't want to pay that, then your priorities are really, really wrong.
Yeah, that just plain and simple just shows that, you don't value it. You would value going out and spending that same amount of money on alcohol or something else, or something that's not going to help your shoulders. So we feel as though that we have spoke about this sort of thing enough, and the people that we have in our program now are those that are definitely more serious about their health and their fitness, and they do have it as a priority. And unfortunately, injuries and aches and pains do happen, but we know a handful of people who are currently seeing Felicity, who is our resident physio at the moment for different bits and pieces. But they've done the right thing, that they've followed through with it. We've got a good relationship with her now. She'll send through some more information on those clients, so we can help understand. She can help us understand the severity of the issue and provides us with some alternatives and things that we can use for the clients as well. But it's been great the last few weeks. Like I said, I won't mention names, but there's been a handful of people who are taking the responsibility into their own hands, and they're doing some extra warm up before the sessions. They're doing some of the stuff afterwards, and I'll chat to them and they'll say they're at home and they do it for the 5 or 10 minutes each day to help aid the recovery. And I think that's obviously the best thing about seeing a physio, is they'll provide things that you can do at home. But just like the old saying is, it's easy to do and easy not to do. But when people are taking the time to do it, it shows us that they are serious about it, and they are really looking forward to getting out of pain and being able to be back in the gym and be able to do everything that they were able to before their injury.
Yeah, one thing I think is very important, I say this once a week to someone, is that there is not one exercise that is important enough that you have to do it. And what I mean by that is, if you have a sore elbow for whatever reason, and we've programmed burpees on the board, and that burpee, that exercise is going to flare your elbow up, or it's going to give you pain after session, we need to look at what the burpee actually is. A burpee is a cardiovascular exercise. So how else can we do that without flaring up your elbow? And that might be a certain number of calories on the assault bike or the rower. So when members come in and they may have an injury, and they might be maybe too scared to tell us, or they really want to do the workout, there is nothing tough about biting down on the mouthpiece, gritting through the workout, and being in pain after. I would much rather have that discussion with any one of our members and get them doing something they're going to be comfortable with, and more importantly, pain-free. Because I know myself that when I had a shoulder issue or an elbow issue, if I did 30 burpees, I would have been in pain for days.
Yeah, and obviously, we can appreciate the frustration that you aren't able to do the workout as prescribed, but sometimes you just need to put your ego aside, and that comes back to the weight you're lifting as well. If previously you could have deadlifted 60 kilos and now you've got some issues in your low back, so maybe it is that we just do it with the barbell, or we do it with kettlebells, or we limit that range of motion so we're not making it a little bit easier on that area. And I think putting that ego aside and understanding that this modification and this change is going to help you. It's not going to hinder you. And yes, it might be a little bit frustrating that you're not doing what everyone else is doing, but in the long run, you need to look at, how it is going to help, and how necessary is it to do, those 3 sets of burpees. And Jamie's right. It's not important. Nothing, there is no single exercise that, is that important. And with our program now, obviously we have smaller sessions. We normally are having conversations with everyone at least before the workout starts. And if someone says, hey, I've got my shoulders playing up, and we'll say, okay, well, not a great idea doing those burpees. Let's do some down ups instead. Your shoulders in a healthy position there. We're not getting into that push up position. So it's our responsibility too, but we need a little bit of help from your end, to be honest with us, if you are feeling some aches and pains. And then also just being willing to put your ego aside.
Yeah, and that example right there, let's just say that person did move over the weekend and they were going overhead all weekend, packing boxes. They're coming Monday and their shoulder's sore, and we got burpees programmed on the board or a push press. At that point, you're probably experiencing just some short-term inflammation, so tendonitis. If you give that shoulder a few days rest, 99.9% of the time, you're going to be good by Wednesday. However, let's say you push through and you do those burpees, and then you're still moving on Tuesday, and then all of a sudden on Wednesday you're doing a push press. That's when that short-term injury can turn into tendinosis, which can become degenerative, which is much, much, much harder to heal in the long run. So just don't be silly. And that's one thing I'm really, really passionate about. So I've been laughed out of the gym before because I won't do a burpee post shoulder operation. There is nothing, no one can say to me, no amount of peer pressure to get me to do something that I know is going to irritate my body after.
Yeah, and I think that's why even more so, in the gym now, we are focusing so much more on the form and technique of all the movements we do. And there have been times when I've told someone to ease up on the weight they're doing because they're unable to hit proper depth in a squat, or they're doing a press above their head and they're pressing it out in front of their body and hyperextending their lower back and putting that in jeopardy of getting hurt. And that in the past we haven't had as much emphasis on that, but now that we are doing training with barbells and heavier weights, it is just so important to help stay out of injury. And that's where we really feel as though spending a little more time, helping you guys with that, making sure and policing that correct movement, and again, putting ego aside. And if we feel as though that you are lifting weight that's a little bit too heavy for you, then we're going to tell you. And that's not a shot on you. That's not saying too weak to lift that. We just have your best interests at heart. So if you do have that conversation with us and we're advising you to lift less, then most of the time, you guys are doing it willingly. And I know it can be a bit frustrating again, but it is always because we're thinking of what's best for you moving forward.
Yeah. Now we spoke about, I guess, the physical aspect of injuries, and just to conclude and wrap the physical side up, strength training is the answer to every single injury, short of something that's really, really, really like high trauma, like a car accident initially. Any kind of ache and pain, lower back pain, plantar fasciitis, tennis elbow, golfer's elbow, shoulder bursitis, shoulder impingement, hip impingement, scoliosis, sciatica, like all the main common injuries. Typically there is a dysfunction in your body. There is something that's not working correctly. And a physio will always program some type of strength training around that injury. So
sorry, just to cut you off. Strength training isn't always having a barbell in your hand either. Strength training can be something as simple as correcting your posture. And that can be by strengthening your glutes, strengthening your hip flexors, and strengthening your transverse abdominal muscles. And that's going to help your posture, which is strength exercises.
Yeah, and one of the definitions for strength is the resistance to force, right? So it can be as simple as a plank. You are resisting the force to drop to the ground, which is going to activate your transverse abdominis, which is a fantastic exercise for your strength. The strength is the ability to resist force. The old man that falls over in the kitchen, if he grabs the bench on the way down, can he resist that force and hold himself up? That's what we mean when we say strength. It's got nothing to do with muscle hypertrophy, which is like muscle growth.
Yeah, and strength, like you touched on it there, is you need a certain amount of strength to be able to get up off the ground if you have fallen over. And a lot of older people lack that strength and that stability within their major joints to be able to get up off the ground. So strength isn't always muscle building and barbells and dumbbells and kettlebells, like Jamie mentioned. It can be something as simple as resisting falling over, holding a plank, so an isometric, and everything in between. And that's where it really is the answer to 99% of injuries. In some way, shape, or form, strength training is going to help.
Okay. And I think moving on to the next topic, more important than physically, I know especially for myself, mentally, it is just absolutely devastating when you get injured. And it is just, if you love training, if your favorite time of the week is coming to one of our gyms and working out, getting injured is really demoralizing, right? Which is why it's so important that we take all those preventative measures to keep you healthy. And it might be when the warm-up, when Mitch takes you through some thoracic extension rotation drills with the foam roller, or I do a bunch of butt work. It is boring, but it is so important long-term.
Yeah, absolutely. And we would, I've spoken to a few members lately about this, and I'm talking to them before the workout, and they can't do certain things, and I give them alternatives and adjust things, and they'll say, "Oh, I'm sorry." I'm sorry. You have to change it, and I'll say, "Don't be sorry. Like I am over the moon that you're here. Like I would much rather have you here and changing these exercises from you than feeling as though that you need to stay at home or you are at home and you're not at sessions." So we love having people there, regardless if they're 100% healthy or if they've got some aches or pains. And if you are one of those people and you feel like you are putting us out by coming in and having to get us to adjust things, then you're really wrong. Like we respect the effort, we respect the determination to come in and to be training while you have that injury, and don't ever feel like you're hindering the session or putting us out. We love having you there and admire that you've taken it upon yourself to keep yourself moving.
Yeah, and I had a great example on Wednesday. So she won't mind me saying, but Karen Arpitson has a tear in her bicep. It's very, very common. It's actually a shoulder injury as your bicep tendon runs into your shoulder. And Wednesday we did hang cleans, and we did ball over the shoulders, two exercises that aren't friendly for your bicep tendon. So the session went on, and Karen spent 45 minutes doing a combination of rowing, assault biking, core work, and doing her prescribed rehab exercises. She was given from a physio. Now, was it as good as a session? Probably not, but it wasn't far off it. But more importantly, Karen got out of bed at 6:15, came to the gym. It was a beautiful morning. She saw her friends. And
she would have felt great about it afterwards. And
yeah.
and there's an argument she wouldn't have done that rehab work by herself, but she still feels great. She comes in, she has a laugh, she sees us, she connects with people. She's, like you said, out of bed and moving, and really sets her mind up for the day. And I feel as though if she had slept in another hour, and then obviously probably would have been a bit upset that she'd missed the gym because of her sore shoulder, she would have got down on herself, and that would have impacted her negatively. So perfect example, like we completely altered that workout for her, but happy to do so, and glad that people are, making it a priority to come in even when they're injured.
Yeah, and I know Karen wouldn't do this, but let's just say that someone had 4 weeks off due to an injury. There is a certain percentage of members that would never come back because not many now, but previously I can remember a few. They've just lost all momentum. And it's just important that even when you're injured, just to set the alarm, drink that water, have a similar meal plan, and just stick as closely to your previous routine and patterns from our previous podcast as possible.
Yeah, momentum is a fantastic thing, and an injury can be a surefire way to put a screeching halt to that momentum, but it doesn't need to. And like you mentioned, I think a big part of that is mindset, and like you said, how it does affect your mindset and your motivation and your discipline towards training, and making alterations to the workout. It's not a negative thing; it's a positive thing because we're helping to get you better. And like we mentioned before, it sets you up for the day. You're still seeing your friends. You're still in there having a laugh. You're sweating in the sunshine. All those good things. So there's a lot more that comes out of training than just the whiteboard and the burpees and the ball cleans and the hang cleans. I mean, they're all things that we have, but like I've said a few times already, we are absolutely more than happy to make changes as needed, and happy to do it for everyone.
Okay, so I think another really important point in terms of just staying like mentally on track, just literally just coming and seeing your friends. Just that alone, like all training aside, if Karen sat there and did nothing, like she's still going to be better off, right? It's just to just still come to the gym, and even if you do 50% of the session, it is better than nothing. It's not that all or nothing mentality. As we mentioned previously, there is not one exercise that is important. I've had a foot injury for about 2 years now, and I refuse to skip. Refuse. Because I know what would happen. And I know if Karen tried to do hang cleans, she'd probably get through the session, but then she'd be in a lot of pain for the rest of the week.
Yeah, and in saying that, there is always something we can have you doing. Like
Yeah.
we could have you doing a 20-minute core circuit where you don't get up off the ground.
Yeah.
So there, yes, it might not be at the same intensity, working the same muscle groups as everyone else, but there is always something you can do. And mentally, socially, with the relationships you have with people there, you are always going to feel better for it.
Yeah. Now, in regards to when you do get injured, I guess when would be the time that you think someone should seek advice outside of the gym, i.e. a physio, Felicity?
As soon as possible.
Yeah,
Really.
but if I move over the weekend and my elbow sore Monday, when would you go see a physio?
I would.
Obviously, you
I
don't
would
go
probably
Tuesday.
I'd probably say a week.
Yeah, I think so too.
I'd say if someone came in Monday and said, "Oh, my shoulder's a bit sore from moving on the weekend," my advice would be, "Okay, let's take it a little bit easier today. Let's strip back the weight a little bit. When we're doing these warm-ups here, if you do feel any I guess worse feeling in that area, we can look to adjust." And then I would be, obviously spending a bit more time with them and seeing how they feel. If they came in the next day or came in Wednesday and said, "Hey, my shoulder's still sore," or maybe it's gotten even a little bit worse, I would say, "Okay, well, let's avoid anything that is above the head or, whatever wherever the pain lies." And my advice there would be, let's give it to the end of the week and see if it feels any better. And if it still feels like this next week, well, you should book yourself in to see someone.
I agree. Now, we have a physio for you and a podiatrist, and I think we've seeked out some really good health professionals in Newcastle. However, my advice to anyone that goes to see any professional is make sure that person understands who you are and understands what you enjoy. Because if I went to a physio and I got the advice of complete rest, then I'm not listening to that. Right?
Yeah, well, I think it's their job as well to understand how important it is to you. If you're someone that just goes to the gym, sticks your headphones in, doesn't see anyone or talk to anyone, then a week off maybe isn't going to change too much. But if you're seeing 10 of your friends 4 times a week in at the gym, then pulling that away from you is going to be very detrimental.
Yeah, and I think that it's important that the person that you go see has some experience in functional training. So for example, Felicity, our physio, I see her maybe once a month. She knows what we do at the gym and she trains at the gym and she believes in strength training, which I think is really important. And Justin, who I see, he was on the podcast, Justin Smith from Achieve Podiatry, his partner owns a CrossFit gym. So he also understands that world. My point being is you should not go and see a 60-year-old physio who hasn't exercised for 20 years.
Well, that was my point before about seeing the GP. I'm sure there are some great GPs out there who do functional training and they strength train and they understand the importance of it. And, they would probably be encouraging people to not only do it, but probably encouraging people to do it at the gym that they go to, because they know that they're running a good ship. But in contrary to that, if you get someone whose priorities aren't aligned and maybe they don't train at all, or they do another form of, maybe they do a lot of swimming, and all of a sudden, they're referring people on to start swimming. And not to say swimming's good or bad, but like you mentioned, I think it is really important that they understand how important it is to you, and preferably they are people who understand what type of training and what it entails as well.
Well, gyms have only been really popular the last 25, 30 years, and especially functional group training. And lots of the literature in regards to strength training, especially with tendons, like tendons in particular, it used to be just complete rest for all of them. For the last 10, 15 years, it's been a complete opposite, where it's, hey, tendons love load because it sends blood flow to the area, which helps heal. So like if you go to an older physio who might not be up to date with the literature, who whacks a TENS machine on you or tells you to ice it, they're probably not the right person.
Yeah, no, exactly.
And my advice too is, if someone gives you advice and you think that's strange, question it. Question it. When Felicity says, do this exercise, I want to know why I'm doing it. Don't just take someone's word for it. Well, mine or yours.
I think that's where it's, at least for the people in our network, it is important that we have good connections, and we know that we do now. So, whenever anyone asks us, hey, who should I see? I'm not saying, hey, where do you live? Oh, you live at Wallsend, go see your local person at Wallsend, because I don't know who they are or if they're good or whatever. But we know that Felicity is good. You know that Justin's a good podiatrist. So, I feel as though seeking out that advice from people like us, and we can be the people who do refer you on to those people, and we know that they know what you're doing at the gym, and we know that what the advice and the prescriptions they're giving you are going to be worthwhile and they're going to be helpful.
Yeah, just a warning to any of our members: if you ask for a physio recommendation on Facebook, I'm going to be pretty upset. Send me a message.
Yeah, I've had that a few times. Or they just, one thing we didn't speak about is they feel like getting a massage is going to fix their shoulder problem.
Yeah, it's not going to fix their shoulder problem. But actually, that's one good thing before we wrap it up. This is a bit long-winded. Let's talk about massage quickly. All right, so you got a sore shoulder. The massage physio, the massage therapist, if they're worth their weight, if they know what they're doing, they'll massage your chest, your traps, and try and release all these tight muscles. Your shoulder will feel good for about 3 days when it's sitting in that right position, and those muscles will get tight again. So the answer always goes back to strength. Passive modalities like massage, acupuncture, dry needle, anything where you're just laying there still and someone's working on you, or you're jamming a foam roller into your hip, it is good for the short term, but then you need to reinforce that with the strength principles that you should be given by your physio.
Well, massage in its most basic sense does soft tissue. Soft tissue is the muscles and all the fascia and things around it, which are important. But you would probably need to be getting 2 or 3 1-hour deep tissue massages a week for it to be something that was going to be long term.
Well, one of your friends went to a chiro, and they what was it? It was they had to see them 3 times a week for 12 months. 3 times a week for 12 months. And that and the chiro thinks that session 156 is going to fix that person's back. What a joke! Like, what if session 3 fixes it?
Yeah, and obviously, but yeah, I think a popular thing that we do here is, I've got a sore back or I've got a sore shoulder, I'm going to go get a massage. And yes, that's going to, I'm not saying don't do that, but it isn't going to fix your problem. No. You're going to feel good, and it does help relax you and relax your nervous system, and that has its positive benefits, obviously, but it isn't going to be something that fixes you for good. So if you enjoy getting a massage, then keep getting a massage, like by all means. It does have definitely some help with the recovery process, but it isn't going to fix the bursitis in your shoulder or in your hip or any other issue that you may have that is joint related.
Yeah, and the majority of people that do get massages or see a chiro for a certain type of injury, they see them forever, right? Yeah. And the job of a really good physio is to give you the tools and the exercises so that you don't have to go back there. Maybe 2, maybe 3, maybe 4 visits as they review your progress. But the goal isn't to be seeing a physio once a month for the rest of your life. The goal isn't to be in orthotics for the rest of your life. The goal isn't to get your neck released with acupuncture once a week. the goal is to, if you're doing that, you're after short-term pain release, which is great because it can make you feel good. And then when you feel good, you need to do the rehab exercises prescribed that will make that change lasting. So a great example is if you do this before you squat. So you'll open up your hips through certain exercises, which temporarily will give you more range at the bottom of your squat. But then more importantly, when you squat, you're creating new strength in that new range, which is going to give you more stability long term.
Yeah, and going back to what you're saying about seeing someone monthly or whatever, if you're seeing a physio monthly and getting a checkup or if you're getting a deep tissue massage once a month or seeing a chiro once a month or whatever, there's no problem in that. But just don't feel as though that it should be the only thing you should be doing to keep yourself healthy. It comes back to doing the rehab exercises that you've been given in the past and warming up correctly and stretching, cooling down correctly and working through full range of motion with all your exercises and all your movements. All those things are just extra. There's no harm in that at all. Obviously, it's just not going to be a miracle fix where a chiro or an osteo cracks your back and your neck a few times once a month and then magically you're good for forever. It should be in addition to taking care of yourself on a day-to-day basis.
Okay. One last thing we should definitely talk about, and I promise this is the last thing. I know we've got a bit long today, because we've gone long because we see it every single day. But one of the other ones that we see a lot are cortisone injections. Okay. So someone will have a shoulder injury like bursitis, or they'll have plantar fascia and they get a needle into their foot. Cortisone is an anti-inflammatory steroid. It basically destroys all the inflammation in the area, which should help with the pain, right? So a runner has heel pain, they've had heel pain for months, they get the injection, they feel great in a week, and then they start running again. And then it comes back, and they get another one, and another one. So cortisone, just like all those passive modalities, it is used temporarily to get you out of pain so you can do your rehab exercises. And I think that's really misunderstood with even our members and a lot of trainers, that cortisone doesn't fix the issue, it just fixes the symptoms. But the symptoms will come back, and quite often worse. How often have you heard that they're going back for their second cortisone, or they're going for their final third cortisone shot, and it just doesn't work long term?
No, and you hear people say, "Oh, the first cortisone didn't work."
Yeah.
And it's like, well,
Why go back for a
it's
second?
not that. It's not like trying for a baby. It's not like it didn't work one night, so you try again the next night. Like it works. You just need to follow all the other protocols and prescriptions that are attached to that. So again, it's not a wonder drug.
Yeah, really one thing that's misunderstood also is it destroys inflammation, but it also destroys muscle, right? So it kills everything. It atrophies everything. So quite often when you get a cortisone shot in your shoulder, it might get rid of the bursa inflammation temporarily, but it also can weaken the muscles, which is why in your entire life you can only have 3 injections into the same spot. That's a pretty good indication of just like it's a pretty dangerous drug. It should only be used at last resort. This is after seeing a physio, podiatrist, chiro, osteo, doing your rehab, and then if there's an issue, maybe.
Yeah, exactly. And I really feel as though if people do the rehab from a physio, as long as it's good information, they're going to fix 90% of their problems.
Yeah.
And I really feel as though a lot of the time people jump onto the next modality, they jump onto the next health professional, but they haven't even given the first thing a real go yet. Hey, you know how this conversation works. Hey, how's your shoulder feeling? Oh, not great. You've been doing your exercises? Nah, not really. Yeah. And then they wonder why it's still sore. Like, of course it's still sore. You haven't done anything to fix it. Like, it doesn't, as we've just discussed, it doesn't get better with rest. So really, just like anything, just like any exercise and training program, just like nutrition program, you need to stick with it for a while. And if you really give it a good try for a month or 3 months or 6 months, and it still is giving you problems, and it's time to move on. But don't be so quick just to jump on to the next thing.
Yeah, and I guess one last thing, another last one is we're all different genetically, and some people definitely are more prone to injury. You hear the term injury prone, and that it's not, I don't think it's ever been studied in literature in terms of like why someone is injury prone. It could be like the length of their femur compared to their torso, which is why they walk a certain way, right? So the point being is we might have members that never get injured. And like you, you're lucky. I think you'll agree with that.
Very fortunate.
Very fortunate.
Yeah, very fortunate.
Yeah, and then there's members like what am I saying again? Like Rose, who have just battled a knee injury, and Rose has done the right stuff, and she's still battling it. The point is, if you are in that population, don't become disheartened, because no matter how bad I've been, no matter how bad Rose's knee gets, no matter how bad Karen's bicep tendon is, there's always something you can do. Always.
Yeah, it's never hopeless.
Yeah.
Even though it might feel like it.
Anything left to say, mate, on injuries or training with injuries, or just a great way to wrap it up?
I think we've touched on it all, and I think we're in a good place with our facilities and our program now, where we do spend ample time warming up, with weights at a general warm up at the start of the sessions, and I really feel like that just sets a scene for moving as well as you can throughout all the movements, and really lessening and reducing the likelihood of experiencing these injuries. So I'm happy where we're at with where our program sits, and I feel as though one of our main, if not the main focus, is to keep our members out of injury, because when members are injured, we know it does impact their training and impacts their mentality as well, which obviously we're looking to do the exact opposite.
Yeah, and I'll wrap it up with that strength is the answer to 99.99% of injuries. And even if you do rehab exercises and you do get stronger and the injury doesn't get better, there is no downside to any form of strength. Strength.
I'll give you that.
All right, mate. Thanks as always. Thanks for listening, guys. Have a lovely, lovely day.
Thanks, guys. Have a great weekend.